Hello friends, in this video we are going to learn the another important topic called as sampling. Let us begin. Let us understand the definition of a sampling process. A process by which a continuous time signal is converted into a discrete time signal is known as a sampling process. So let's say we have a continuous time signal. Suppose if I pass this continuous time signal through a switch which is opened and closed at some sampling rate. So the speed with which this switch is opened and closed is known as a sampling frequency. So we know that whenever we close the switch, the signal is passed. When we open the switch, the signal is not passed. Therefore, what will happen is the same signal will be available in this discrete form. So this is called as a discrete time signal. So discrete time signal is a signal which is present only at discrete time. Am I right? Now the question is, why do we want to discretize the continuous time signal and why do we require a sampling process to do so? So let us see why do we require a discrete time signal. A very first reason is when it comes to a transmission of signal, discrete time signals are far more convenient as compared to the normal continuous time signal. So a very first reason is discrete time signal are better to transmit. You must have studied the classification of transmission of the signal in which we have preferred digital transmission over the analog transmission. So if you want to digitize the signal, first of all, you have to take a continuous time signal, convert it into a discrete time signal. Then by the process of a quantization, we get a digital signal. And without digital signal, you cannot have a digital transmission. And in order to achieve digital transmission, because it is far more better as compared to a normal analog communication, we go for discretization of the signal. And to convert the signal from continuous time to a discrete time, we require a process called as a sampling process. So this is one reason why we go for a sampling process. The second reason is that it is easy to store the signal. So we know that if I want to store the signal in a memory, you need to again digitize the signal. Am I right? So for digitizing the signal, again, you have a continuous signal in your hand. You have to first of all do the sampling, and after sampling, we do the quantization, and from quantization, we get a digital signal. Unless and until you convert it into a digital signal, you cannot actually store it into a memory. So if you want to, let's say, store it into a memory, you require a sampling process. So this is the second reason why we require a sampling process. Third, and a very, very important reason, whenever you want to process the signal, fine. Whenever you want to process the signal, you require a digital signal processors, that is DSPs. So if you want to process the signal, you require a digitized signal, or you require a digital signal, or you require a discrete time signal first of all. So this is the third reason why do we require a sampling process, or why do we require a discrete signals. So this was the another reason. If you want to process the signal, you require a discrete signal. And if you want to achieve a discrete signal, you have to follow a sampling process. And sampling process is a process by which you pass a continuous time signal through a switch which is opened and closed at a specific interval. The speed with which it is opened and closed, samples are sent, that speed is called as a sampling frequency. Fine. The sampling frequency is denoted as omega s or fs. If you see a time spacing between two consecutive samples, this is known as ts, that is called as a sampling period. So ts stands for a sampling period, and 1 upon ts is called as fs, called as a sampling frequency, and if you multiply fs with 2 pi, it becomes again omega s. So this is also a sampling frequency, but since it is an angular frequency, the unit is radians per second. The unit of fs is hertz. So the question is, how sampled signal look like? So I've already shown you the structure, but then whenever you are sampling the signal, you cannot have a random sampling. So what do I mean? I'll show you. For example, you have this kind of signal. So this is a continuous time signal, am I right? And let's say I'm taking 3 samples. Okay, I'm taking 3 random samples from here. So after discretization, it may look like this. So this is a discrete time signal. This is a continuous time signal. And after processing, we get this discrete time signal. Now the question is, from this discrete time signal, am I able to get the continuous time signal information? Because let's say if I have these 3 samples, am I able to reconstruct my original signal back? Then answer is no. Why? Because I'll show you. You can reconstruct it this way, or you can reconstruct it this way, or one may reconstruct it like this, meaning that if you have a lesser number of samples, then it is quite difficult to reconstruct the original signal back, meaning that whatever information that you have, it should get conveyed properly. So you must have enough number of samples in such a way that you are able to reconstruct your signal. I hope you got my point. In continuous time signal, we don't take all amplitudes, instead we take samples. But those number of samples should be enough in a way that you can reconstruct the signal, or you can imagine from which continuous signal you have discretized it. Am I right? And to do so, you have to follow certain rules, or you have to follow a certain theorem called as a sampling theorem. So let us understand how sampling theorem works and how many samples you should have to reconstruct the original signal. Let us assume we have a signal called as g of t here, and assume that I'm going to multiply this g of t with this impulse train. So what is this? This is a continuous impulse train, that is continuous time impulse signal. If I multiply this g of t with this impulse signal, as you can see, this impulse signal is present only at specific intervals, that is at time equal to 0, at time equal to ts, at time equal to 2ts. In between ts and 2ts, there is no signal, am I right? In that case, what is going to happen? I'm going to get only those samples of g of t at which impulses are present. So as you can see, this g of t, I can say it is g of 0. I can call this amplitude as g of ts. This amplitude, I can call this as g of 2ts. This position, I can say it is g of minus ts. This is g of minus 2ts, and so on. Am I right? So now you can imagine, if I'm multiplying this g of t signal with this continuous time impulse train signal, then what is going to happen? I'm going to get a signal which would certainly look like this. So this envelope I'm just drawing for my reference so as to get a perfect amplitude. But in reality, what you are going to get is this one. So I'll be getting this kind of structure present at t equal to 0, present at t equal to ts, present at t equal to twice of ts, minus 3ts, or I supposed to say minus 2ts instead, and so on. So whenever you are multiplying your continuous time signal g of t with this continuous time impulse train or impulse signal, then you are supposed to get this kind of a discrete time structure. So this is now called as a discrete time signal, which is not present continuously but present at specific intervals like 0, ts, 2ts, minus 2ts, and so on. So it is something that is happening in time domain. Let us see what happens in frequency domain. And we know that since we are studying a Fourier transform, I'll use a make I'll make use of Fourier transform tool in order to transfer the signal from time domain to frequency domain. So I'll be using a Fourier transform. So I'll be transferring each and every signal in frequency domain now. So let us say I have used a Fourier transform tool in order to transfer the signal g of t. So this was originally g of t. Now it will become g of omega after Fourier transform. Since it is in frequency domain, on x-axis we will have omega and not as t. Okay, so I assume that I got some rough structure of g of omega like this. So we have, let's say, omega m. Let's say we have minus omega m here. Again, you should not think why it is a triangular one. You can assume certainly like this, or again you can have some random shape like this. My point is just to specify two frequencies here, that is omega m and minus omega m. So omega m is considered to be the maximum frequency content of your signal g of t. Fine. So as I said, please don't get into the shape. We are just learning the concept here. Fine. Let me remove them. So as I'm trying to convey you that omega m is a maximum frequency component present, because after all, why we are transferring our signal from time domain to frequency domain, just to decompose your signal into frequency domain, or just to see what are its frequency components. Okay, so my motive is clear, that omega m over here is a maximum frequency content of the signal g of t. So as I said, I'm transferring each and every signal in frequency domain, and to do so I'm using a Fourier transform tool. Even for a continuous impulse signal, I'm going to have a Fourier transform. So we don't have a direct Fourier transform for a continuous impulse signal, but if you remember, we have used a Fourier series. If you have watched all the videos, we have done Fourier series before covering Fourier transform, in which I have already taught you how to do a Fourier series for impulse signal. So you know that after having a Fourier series, you get this kind of structure. Of course, we will have omega. Continuous time impulse signal. Once a Fourier series of this continuous time impulse signal is taken, you get a discrete structure in Fourier series of fixed amplitude as 1 by t. So each and every discrete signal over here will have an amplitude of 1 by t. So for this sample, I will get this sample. For this sample, which is present at Ts, I'll get a sample present at omega s. Similarly, I'll get sample at minus omega s. I'll get sample at twice of omega s, at minus twice of omega s, and so on. So this is something is going to continue. Am I right? So this is what is used to happen in Fourier series. Let me tell you, we are not interested in Fourier series. What we are still interested in Fourier transform. Am I right? But since for impulse signal, we don't have a direct transformation to Fourier transform, what I've done, it was something that is known to me, a Fourier series form for a continuous time impulse signal. But then I'll be definitely doing its Fourier transform also. So I'll make sure that you will have a Fourier transform structure for a continuous time impulse signal. So whenever you want a Fourier transform, you need f of omega. That is something which is function of omega. And we know the relation between Fourier series and Fourier transform. F of omega is always 2 pi ck. Am I right? Where ck stands for Fourier series coefficients. So as you can see, Fourier series coefficients values are 1 by t. Everywhere the value of ck is 1 by t. So I would say f of omega will become 2 pi times 1 by t, or I would say f of omega, it's simply 2 pi by t. Am I right? So now I can draw its Fourier transform like this. So we will have 2 pi by t. as a magnitude part for every f of omega. Again, they are present at same intervals, that is 0, omega s, twice of omega s, and this shall continue. This is minus omega s, minus 2 omega s, and this is also going to get continue. So on a conclusion part, I'll say we have a Fourier transform for continuous time impulse train as this one. Am I right? So what happened in time domain, that we tried to multiply g of t with continuous impulse signal. And if you remember, if you multiply in time domain or if you multiply in one domain, in other domain, what happens is convolution. Am I right? So you know that we have studied a convolution theorem or a convolution rule. If there is convolution in time domain, it becomes multiplication in frequency domain, and vice versa is true. If it is multiplication in time domain, then in frequency domain, what happens is convolution. So we are going to convolve these two signals now. That is g of omega with this kind of structure that we have got after having a Fourier transform of a continuous time impulse signal. And before we proceed with that, let me remind you something. Suppose you have signal called as g of omega, and let's say if you are convolving with impulse function L of omega, then you get g of omega only. Please don't get confused between a multiplication rule and a convolution rule. In multiplication rule, suppose g of omega, let's say multiplied with del of omega. Try to understand the difference. It is g of 0 multiplied with del of omega. Is that right? So these two rules are different. You need to understand the difference. So this is first thing we have done. Second rule I want to tell you, that let's say g of omega convolved with del of omega minus omega s. In that case, it is simply g of omega minus omega s. For example, if you try to multiply, that is g of omega with del of omega minus omega s, then it gives you g of omega s multiplied with del of omega minus omega s. I hope now you can differentiate between a convolution operation and multiplication operation. So try to understand this g of omega we have got after having a Fourier transform for g of t, whereas del of omega means impulse function present at omega equal to 0. So please understand this del of omega means present at omega equal to 0. Again, g of omega is your same signal in frequency domain, but this del of omega minus omega means a impulse signal present at omega equal to omega s. Am I right? Then suppose if I want to convolve my g of omega with the impulse function present at omega equal to minus omega s, that is negative frequency, then I'll convolve with del of omega plus omega s. Then what I supposed to get? I supposed to get g of omega plus omega s. Is that right? So this is how things happens. So this is how we convolve our signal with delta function. Finally, we have this. So g of omega, I'm going to convolve with this kind of impulse train, having area of every impulse function as 2 pi by t, assuming magnitude at g of omega as 1 for simplicity. Again, it may not be 1, it may be something else. So let us perform a convolution now. So here g of omega is going to get convolved at each and every impulse function. I repeat, this g of omega signal, which is a Fourier transform form for g of t, is going to get convolved with each and every impulse function present over here. For example, let's say if g of omega is convolving with the impulse function present at omega equal to omega 0, how you are going to represent it? You are going to represent it like this. Your g of omega is getting convolved with del of omega. What is del of omega? The impulse function present at omega equal to omega 0. But here, area of impulse function is not 1, area is 2 pi by t. Then I need to specify that also, that is 2 pi by t. Am I right? So this will also get multiplied with extra term called as 2 pi. Not 2 pi, but 1 upon 2 pi. Then I'll remind you about this extra term. So I'll write it over here. Suppose x of t convolved with h of t. After having a Fourier transform, it becomes like this: x of omega multiplied by h of omega. We know the fact convolution in time domain becomes multiplication in frequency domain, and vice versa is also true. As I said, let's say you have x of t, and this time let's say you are multiplying with h of t, then a Fourier transform will be 1 upon 2 pi times x of omega convolve with h of omega. Fine. So multiplication in time domain becomes convolution in frequency domain, but with a very extra term, that is 1 upon 2 pi. So you shouldn't forget this extra term, that is 1 upon 2 pi. And here I have shown that extra term 1 upon 2 pi. So after having the convolution, this 2 pi will get cancelled, and what is remaining is, as you can see, 1 by t is left. So it becomes 1 by t g of omega. So try to understand, I already have g of omega. Now this g of omega is having a coefficient as 1 by t. Then I'll draw it this way. So here I'm going to draw it on omega scale. So g of omega with coefficient as 1 by t. Then similar thing I'm going to draw for g of omega, but will have magnitude as 1 by t instead of 1. As you could see, for g of omega, maximum frequency content is omega m, and negative frequency is minus omega m. Is that right? So as I said, this g of omega will get convolved with each and every impulse function. This time, let's say I'm convolving g of omega with this impulse function now. So please forget about this convolution. Now I'm going to convolve with the impulse function present at omega equal to omega s. So now our target is to convolve our g of omega with this signal. Then a convolution will become like this. So we know that for convolution, 1 upon 2 pi term will come as extra part. Still, you have to convolve your g of omega with the impulse function present at positive omega s. Then how you're going to show it? Del of omega minus omega s. Am I right? But this time, area is not 1. Area is 2 pi by t. I supposed to show that 2 pi by t here also. Again, 2 pi get cancelled. What is remaining? Tell me. G of omega, when convolved with del of omega minus omega s, we have already learned it becomes g of omega minus omega s, along with extra term as 1 by t. Am I right? So can you see that you still have same coefficient as 1 by t? So magnitude wise it is same, but only thing is it is having omega minus omega s in bracket. What does that mean? Your original g of omega gets shifted by omega s. This is called as a frequency shifting. So by using a frequency shifting, I'll shift my g of omega at a positive frequency at omega s. So let's say here it is omega s. So same g of omega is now getting shifted by frequency omega s. Will have a similar structure like this. So as you could see, the maximum content is omega m. So here it will be omega s plus omega m, and the minimum content of frequency was minus omega m. So what we will have on this scale is omega s minus omega m. I hope things are clear. Similarly, I'm going to convolve g of omega at each and every impulse function present over here. So let me say now I'm going to convolve at negative frequency minus omega s. Then I'm performing convolution over here. You know that for convolution purpose, 1 upon 2 pi term will come by default. This time you're convolving g of omega with the impulse function present at minus omega s. It means it would be del of omega plus omega s. We know that again area of the impulse function is not 1, it is 2 pi by t. So I'm going to specify that 2 pi by t here also. Again, after convolving 2 pi will get cancelled. So 1 by t as coefficient, and g of omega when convolved with del of omega plus omega s, it becomes g of omega plus omega s. So we know how our g of omega looks like. G of omega plus omega s means it is present at omega equal to minus omega s frequency. So now I have to concentrate on minus omega s frequency. So if you remember, the maximum frequency content is omega m. So it would be minus omega s plus omega m, and this point will be minus omega m, meaning that minus omega s minus omega m. And of course it will have the same magnitude as 1 by t throughout. So you know what? Since now my g of omega will also get convolved with this signal also. So I'll be getting some function like this. And here also I'm going to get some function like this. So this is something which is periodic in nature now. Am I right? So this is something which is periodic in nature. And I hope you got a complete structure of the signal. So as you have seen, in time domain, we multiplied this signal. So what happened is, originally it was a continuous time signal. After multiplication with impulse train, we got a discrete signal. In which domain? Again, we are still in time domain only. But what type of structure we got is a discrete time domain. We had a Fourier transform for g of t, which looks like this, where omega m is a maximum frequency content for g of omega. Thereafter, we have converted our impulse train in Fourier transform. We got this kind of structure. We know that multiplication in time domain, what happens in frequency domain is convolution. Therefore, we convolve our g of omega with this kind of structure. Then the result, as you can see, after convolving, we got the structure which I have drawn. Let's say at figure 3. So I'll call this as figure 1. This is your figure 2, and this is figure 3. So as you see, figure 3, it is a result of the convolution or a result of sampling, but in frequency domain. So now we will have some important observations or conclusions. So a very first conclusion is that what you tried to do in time domain, you tried to have a sampling process. And because of the sampling process, what type of structure you got? It was a discrete time structure. So whenever you have a discrete structure in time domain, after having a Fourier transform, you got a periodicity in frequency domain. Let us not talk about a time domain and frequency domain. Let me tell you in general. A discrete structure in one domain becomes periodicity in another domain. I repeat, discrete structure in one domain becomes a periodicity in another domain. Second conclusion. We have learned a Fourier series. Am I right? So if you remember, in Fourier series, we used to have a periodic signal in time domain. So if you remember, after having a Fourier series, we used to get a discrete structure. That is, we used to have a CK plots. So if you remember, we used to have CK plots like this. So when you have a periodic signal in one domain, it becomes a discrete structure in another domain. And vice versa is also true. Whenever you have a discrete structure in time domain, it becomes a periodicity in another domain. That is, if you remember, we have this kind of structure and then which repeats itself. If you remember, the magnitude over here is 1 by t. The center frequency over here, it is 0. Here it was omega s. Here it was omega s, but in negative frequency, that is minus omega s. And also we have seen a Fourier transform where we used to operate on a periodic signal. A periodic signal is also known as a non-periodic signal. So we used to be in time domain, and whenever we have a Fourier transform, we get a continuous time signal. We get a continuous structure in frequency domain. So please try to understand. Discretization in one domain brings a periodicity in another domain. Periodic signal in one domain brings discretization in another domain. If you have a aperiodicity, that is a periodic signal in one domain, it makes a continuous structure in other domain. So aperiodic signal in time domain becomes a continuous structure in frequency domain. Periodic signal in one domain becomes a discrete structure in other domain, or vice versa. If you have a discrete structure in time domain, it becomes a periodic structure in frequency domain. So try to understand this. Once a gate question is also asked on this, it was a question like this: match the following, and you had to match the correct option. So if concepts are clear, such questions can be easily handled. So let me remind you what we have got a final product with us after sampling in frequency domain. So this was a periodic in nature, so this will repeat itself. 1 by t was the magnitude, center frequency was 0, maximum content was omega m minus omega m. Here center frequency is omega s, this is omega s plus omega m, this is omega s minus omega m. So frequency over here is minus omega s, what we have over here is minus omega s plus omega m, and what we have over here is minus omega s minus omega m. Now by observation, we have another frequency content as omega s minus omega m. By observation, you just try to see whether I'm saying it is true or false. What I'm claiming by the observation that omega s minus omega m is greater than omega m, because this is omega scale. And of course it is true, because something which is plotted later would be definitely have a greater value as compared to the value which is previous one. So omega s minus omega m, here it is greater than omega m. So here I can shift my minus omega m to right hand side and it will become like this: omega s greater than twice of omega m. I would say this is case number 1. So what is case number 1? Case number 1 is omega s minus omega m is greater than omega m. In that case, omega s is greater than twice of omega m, where omega s stands for sampling frequency and omega m is called as a maximum frequency component of the original signal. So original signal is the one which is a sample signal. So I can write it in terms of f also, that is fs is greater than twice of fm. So this is called as case number 1, and case number 1 is also called as a oversampling case. So what is the reason it is called as oversampling? I'll explain you after explaining you 2 more cases after this. So let us move to the next case, that is case 2. So in this case, as you can see, now samples are touching each other, am I right? So they are not overlapping, but they are touching each other. So let me remind you, we had center frequency as 0 over here, and the maximum frequency content was omega m. And here, the starting point of the second sample was omega s minus omega m. Is that right? So if I'm saying that if this point is a same point, then I would say case number 2, where omega m is equal to omega s minus omega m, or I can say omega s is equal to twice of omega m. Now the question is how I'm doing this. Fine. So it is obtained just by changing the sampling frequency omega m. So if I just keep on changing omega m, then this will happen. That is, either those samples will come closer to each other or they will go away from each other. As you can see in case number 1, in case number 1, all the samples are away from each other, and this is again by changing omega s. So omega s is the sampling frequency which is a variable here. Let me tell you, omega m is a maximum frequency content of the given signal or a sample signal. It is fixed. We are not going to change it. We cannot in fact change it. This is constant. So omega m is constant. Omega s is variable. So by varying omega s, those samples, that is sample 1, sample 2, sample 3, will either go away from each other or they will come closer to each other. So in first case, I made sure that omega s is greater than twice of omega m, so they are away from each other. In case number 2, what I did is I made omega m such a way that it will become exactly equal to omega s minus omega m. So here what I got is omega s is equal to twice of omega m, or in terms of f I can write fs is equal to twice of fm. Am I right? And let me tell you, this is called as a Nyquist frequency. So this is called as a Nyquist frequency. And further, if I lower down my omega s in such a way that those samples are coming closer to each other in such a way that they will start overlapping each other. Okay. In this case, as you can see, it has really not happened. It has really not happened. Here, omega s is greater than twice of omega m. Am I right? And I have lowered my omega s in such a way, now it has become not greater, but exactly equal to twice of omega m. But still, my samples are just touching each other. Am I right? And they are easily reconstructible. It means, what is meant by reconstruction? Reconstruction means I can easily separate them to have my original triangle. This was my original information. Am I right? So still I'm able to separate it, and this type of case is called as a critical sampling. So this is called as a critical sampling. So if you refer case number 1, here omega s is greater. Okay, here omega s is quite greater, and it is greater than twice of omega m. Here omega s is lowered in such a way, now it is not greater, but at least equal to twice of omega m, in which samples have come closer to each other in such a way that they are going to touch each other, but still it is possible for me to separate them. Am I right? Or to have my original information, and this is your original information. This is your original information. Am I right? And still I'm able to get my original information, and this is called as a critical sampling. A frequency at which I get a critical sampling is called as a Nyquist frequency, designated as FNQ. So please remember, FNQ is called as twice of FM, where FM is a maximum frequency content of the sampled signal. So remember, omega s or omega NQ, omega s is also represented as omega NQ, that is a sampling frequency. Now we shall see a case 3 also. In case 3, I'm going to lower my omega s in such a way that omega s will be lesser than twice of omega m. How? I'll show you. So let's say I have this kind of structure. I'm sure you remember their points. So this was omega m, and this point was omega m, and this point was omega s minus omega m. So what is my observation? That omega s minus omega m, this time it is lesser than omega m. So omega s minus omega m is lesser than omega m, or I can say, by shifting minus omega m to right hand side, I'll get omega s lesser than twice of omega m. Or in fact, in terms of f, I can write fs is smaller than twice of fm. So you know what is happening here? Those samples are overlapping each other, so there would be overlapping over here. Because of overlapping, now what will happen when I'm trying to reconstruct the original signal back? I'll be getting this kind of structure. So this information over here, which was overlapped, it is now gone, or it is lost. So this is a loss of information. So this overlapping indicates a loss of information. And this loss of information is known as aliasing effect. And of course, this aliasing effect is undesirable. So what we can conclude from all the three cases? In case number 1, we had omega s in such a way that it was greater than twice of omega m. Look at case number 1. So case number 1 was omega s greater than twice of omega m. So we have more number of samples. We have more number of samples to reconstruct the signal. Why? Because omega s is greater than twice of omega m. So since sampling frequency is more, okay, so number of samples would be more. Every time you close the switch, you get some sample at output. Am I right? So if you increase the speed of opening and closing, then what will happen? You'll get more samples at output. So this increasing the speed of the switch means increasing the sampling frequency. More is the sampling frequency, more are the samples, more are the samples, it means there are maximum chances that you are going to reconstruct your signal easily. Here, what is happened in case number 2? Sampling frequency is equal to twice of omega m. In this case, you have lowered your sampling frequency as compared to case number 1. So you have lowered number of samples, but still by observation graphically, you are still able to reconstruct your original signal out. Am I right? So it is possible only when at least sampling frequency should be equal to twice of omega m. If it is greater than twice of omega m, there is absolutely no problem. It is a good thing that you have more number of samples. With more number of samples, you have a maximum probability that you will get your original signal easily. In case number 2, it is a critical frequency, because even if you change your sampling frequency bit lesser than twice of omega m, then you will move to case number 3, where samples will start overlapping each other. A loss of information will happen because of the overlapping, called as aliasing effect. So in case number 3, what is happening? You have less number of samples. So case number 3 means your omega s is lesser than twice of omega m. So you have a lesser number of samples, and because of the lesser number of samples, there will be a overlapping. So case number 3 is called as undersampling. So on conclusion note, I'll say when omega s, that is sampling frequency, is greater than twice of omega m, or in terms of f, you can write when fs is more than twice of fm, this is known as oversampling, and oversampling brings you more number of samples. So with more number of samples, you can reconstruct your signal very easily. Second, omega s is perfectly equal to twice of omega m, or in terms of f, you can write fs is exactly equal to twice of fm. This is known as perfect sampling. Perfect sampling means you have enough number of samples. This perfect sampling is sometimes called as a critical sampling. One more thing, when fs is equal to twice of fm, this is called as a Nyquist frequency. Because this whole experiment done by Nyquist, who has proved that at least when sampling frequency is equal to twice of fm, you have a perfect sampling. That is, you have enough number of samples in such a way that you are going to reconstruct your signal back. When omega s is lesser than twice of omega m, or when fs is less than twice of fm, it means you have lesser number of samples, and this is called as undersampling. It means you have less number of samples, and since you have lesser number of samples, it means you are not going to reconstruct your signal very easily. In fact, there would be overlapping between two consecutive samples, and it would have a aliasing effect. So I'm sure you have understood the meaning of sampling, how sampling process takes place, what is meant by a Nyquist criteria, what is meant by a Nyquist frequency, what if the sampling frequency is about twice of fm, what if it is equal to twice of fm, what if it is lesser than twice of fm. You have studied all the cases. Thank you.